Thank you, Lisa. First of all, I'd just love to say what an amazing welcome I've received here in Kansas City. This facility has blown my mind. It's not just the amazing trees and the variety of trees outside, it's the architecture, it's the collections, it's the service that it provides, not just to the community, but to the world. The first edition copy of Isaac Newton's Principia, however you pronounce it, I actually got to touch it. That is extraordinary. There's a real human connection when you can actually read such an extraordinary book. But it's not those things, or perhaps it is those things that infuses this particular library, the Linda Hall Library, with the spirit that's alive in all of the staff, the board members, obviously all of you, you know this is a gem, and that's extraordinary in today's world. So thank you. Now, it's true, I'm passionate about escaping from gravity, and I haven't quite managed to do that yet. So I keep trying. But let me start off with a little, journey, starting with my grandfather, 25-year-old airmail pilot, who, in a fit of inspiration, realized he wanted to show the world that his chosen profession, aviation, could be used for commercial purposes. So that inspiration, coupled with chasing a monetary prize, throw in a little bit of risk management, because aviation is still risky, but in those days it was incredibly risky, and airplanes crashed, and pilots and passengers died very frequently in the early days. So it was incredibly risky. So that inspiration mixed with risk management and an incredible dose of determination that my grandfather had quite a bit of enabled him to fly from New York to Paris, to be the first person to fly solo between the cities of New York and Paris. And that flight, more than any other, perhaps, jump-started the golden era of aviation and really caused a radical shift in the public's perception about what aviation could be used for. I like to say that before grandfather made his transatlantic flight in 1927, people who flew in airplanes were called barnstormers and daredevils and flying fools. And after he flew across the Atlantic, people who flew in airplanes were called pilots and passengers. And that really jump-started the era of long-distance air transportation. That's morphed into the industry that we know today and enables me to travel out from Seattle and last week to Buffalo and Telluride, Colorado, to be more just commonplace. That's an extraordinary shift in the world's perspective. Now, when I was young, I was more interested in short-distance air transportation. You can laugh, that's a joke. But I was very comfortable flying through the air on skis. My whole sense of self was physical. I was a Washington State champion gymnast, and I water skied around Bainbridge Island, where I grew up when I was a senior in high school, to raise money for a nonprofit and have fun. And I thought, as a senior in high school, if I got stuck behind a desk pushing a pencil, I guess today it would be a computer, I couldn't live with that because I was such a physical guy. But when I turned 21, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And over the next decade, it waxed and waned, but it slowly destroyed my sense of self and my ability to walk. I could only walk with a cane, and that sense of self I lost it, and I couldn't work, and I spent most of my life sitting, and it was a a terrible transition from that sort of run and jump and do a flip and then play Frisbee with the guys kind of a thing. So it was the worst thing that could have happened to me. But in 1996, I had both of my knees replaced, and a couple of years later started taking a breakthrough biotechnology drug, and it gave me a second chance at life. And I realized at the time, as I started rebuilding, I had the opportunity to reimagine who I wanted to be in the world. And it freed me. And I don't know if I'd get a third chance at life. So it enabled me to push through the personal barriers that I had, and enabled me to do some extraordinary things. I'll segue into that. But during that time, when I was feeling okay, I would make furniture, sculptures in my shop, in my neighbor's shop, and sell them at the local farmer's market. And that really gave me some ability to escape from gravity, the gravity of my life at that point, which was, let's just say it was very high specific gravity, not like Mars or the moon, more like twice the Earth, I guess. But enabled me to finish some projects and actually sell them and make some money and have some sense of spark. So that's continued throughout my life. And I like to joke, making sawdust keeps me from blasting off into space, and it gives me something that's very special, that escape, to work on things that I love and I feel and I emote with. I have emotion around, and every so often I sell a piece and a customer just says, I love it, and that's been a great escape for me. That process, along with sort of getting another chance at life, enabled me to have what I call an evolution in my spirit, that reimagination of who I could be, and also allowed me to push through the barriers of being a Lindbergh. As you can imagine, my grandfather and then my grandparents, really incredibly famous at a time when communications nearly instantaneously spanned the globe for the first time in human history. And that caused a great burden on the family, if you will. And so for me to think about walking in or filling my grandfather's shoes was, untouchable. But getting another chance at life and realizing I needed to live now, today, enabled me to realize I didn't need to fill his shoes. They're unfillable, but I could walk in his footsteps and explore. That led me to wondering if I could fly across the Atlantic. After all, I was a pilot, and I now had some measure of my physical life back and was still building. In fact, I'm still building today. So on the 75th anniversary, I decided I needed to fly across the Atlantic to celebrate that history and send the world another message, a message about the future. So on the 75th anniversary, I flew from San Diego to St. Louis. San Diego, obviously, where the Spirit of St. Louis was built, to St. Louis, where grandfather's backers were, the Spirit of St. Louis organization that said, yeah, you do it, Slim. And then to New York, and then New York to Paris, nonstop in a small single-engine aircraft, but not a Spirit of St. Louis. That seemed a little risky to me. And some other guy had done it 75 years earlier, so I didn't need to do that. And with the idea that the future of flight might be spaceflight. Could we travel via spaceflight into orbit and fly around the world in 45 minutes? That was the idea. And along the way, I thought, I need to do something when I get there. So I'm out over the ocean thinking, what should I do? There might be cameras. There will be people. I know my mom's going to be there watching. And so I thought, it's my first time to Europe, my first time to France. And I get out, I land, I survived the flight, I land, and there's this 75-year-old tarmac, and I'm going to kiss that ground? Okay, a deal's a deal. I get down, I kiss the ground, and I have to say that's an American kiss. That is not a French kiss, okay? Yeah, anyway. So I like to say thank this man for changing the world's expectations on aviation. And I don't mean my grandfather, I mean this guy. His name is Raymond Orteig. And in 1919, he publicized a $25,000 prize offered to the first aviator that could fly nonstop between the cities of New York and Paris. I think his communication said, all other details in your care. So a very simple prize. Well, 7 teams spent $400,000 trying to win that $25,000 prize. That's extraordinary leverage if you're thinking about it. And all of that research and development went into long-distance air travel. Grandfather just happened to be thinking a little bit outside of the box with that one and flew a single piloted airplane, unlike most of the competitors. And captured it as a dark horse, if you will. If you were a betting person, you probably would have bet on him last. And in fact, the New York Times had an editorial saying, put Lindbergh in jail. He's going to kill himself and set aviation back 10 years. Just a very interesting note in history. People forget that aviation was developed primarily by 2 or 3 things. Warfare, obviously, and prizes and races which have prizes usually, that really developed that. So sort of taking that prize philanthropy modality into the future, I was with incredibly fortunate to be with a small group of people in St. Louis, right across the state, under the arch in 1996, and we announced a $10 million prize, the largest cash prize in history. And that would be awarded to the first privately funded manned space program that could fly up to an altitude of 62 miles into space, 328,000 feet, return safely, and do it again within 2 weeks to show that it was reusable. The space shuttle at the time cost $500 million to refurbish and fly. So it was incredibly expensive. And the idea behind this prize was not necessarily to go suborbital, because Alan Shepard had done that many years ahead of us. But it was to jumpstart the private spaceflight industry, much like grandfather jump-started the aviation industry. It was crazy. But and we actually should have failed. It should not have worked. But somehow we did it. I helped the XPRIZE survive by all those pre-social media impressions. We didn't have social media back then, I think. We had internet, and you could follow along on the flight, but it was really clunky, and I think about 30 or 40 people followed the dot on the internet. That was only 14 years ago, or 16 years ago that I did my flight. So 2004, October 4th, 2004. That's today. That's 14 years ago today. Spaceship One took off on that prize-winning flight, the second of 2 flights, and flew up into space, returned safely. Mike Melville at the controls. Mike, just an aside, was too old to fly for the airlines at the time, but he could fly an experimental rocket ship into space. That was extraordinary, and it really worked. Today we have, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, and they're getting ready to sell us tickets to fly into space or do research, like sending Teslas to the sun, important stuff like that. I wish I could be here for Matt Steinmetz soon. You should all see him. He's an extraordinary person on that team who I got to speak with about 7 or 8 months ago with Julian Guthrie and her book, How to Make a Spaceship, which really documents some of the stories behind our little band of renegades who really should have failed. And the stories of how we overcame those failures was extraordinary because each member of the team stepped up at a different time and saved the organization. It's difficult to run a nonprofit for 9 years without real programming and have staff and try to administer a large prize like that. So it's a wonderful treat. I know you have it on the shelf back here. I'm not sure if you can check it out or not, but go buy it. It's on Amazon. And I'll just give you a teaser. We didn't actually raise the full amount of the $10 million prize that we gave away. And it's in the book. I will tell you that our backup, never mind, read the book. It'll blow your mind because we really should have failed. And it was one of those 9-year overnight success stories. But again, it's an amazing read. And to be a part of a small group of people who got Spaceship One hanging in the Air and Space Museum next to the Spirit of St. Louis and the X-1 that Yeager broke the sound barrier in, it was incredibly empowering. We really changed the way the world thinks about spaceflight and jump-started this new private spaceflight industry that's going to help enable us to start to utilize the resources of space and maybe someday move heavy manufacturing into space and lessen the dependence on the resources here on Earth. And it led us all to ask ourselves, could we do that again? And how do we do that again? It was just incredibly empowering as a group. And I'm not really a rocket scientist. I flew Estes rockets when I was a kid, and that's about it. I think orbital mechanics are the guys that wrench on the spaceships, maybe? That was a joke, too. So I set my sights back on aviation, my industry. And it was about that time I discovered electric propulsion for aircraft and the promise that we could make general aviation clean and quiet and safe and simple. And that would revitalize general aviation. So we started giving prizes for demonstrating excellence in the field of electric flight, for demonstrating hardware. And one of our recipients of the Lindbergh Prize for Electric Flight was this company called Evo that in Germany that cracked the code on distributed electric propulsion. So they had 16 or 18, I can't remember, electric motors and hobby propellers, and they put it on this array, and they developed the coding to figure out how to use the differential thrust to control it safely. And that was an extraordinary moment. Everybody went, oh, this isn't just bolting an electric motor on an existing airframe like we did with jets when they first came out. Once we figured out we could do swept wing jets, this makes vertical takeoff and landing like a helicopter possible and changes the game. When I showed it to my friends at Sikorsky, and there's a video on YouTube, they said, looks like that could be one of those frog in a blender things. On an exercise ball, a bouncing frog in a blender. They, of course, now have quite a substantial amount of funding and have put their array of propellers up above like a helicopter, which looks a lot safer. So around this time, I gave a a keynote at a noise conference, and I didn't even know that there was such a thing as noise conferences, all about industrial noise and noise in our environment, how it affects humans and animals and so forth. And I showed this my first flight in an electric airplane, which was really quite quiet. It was extraordinary. I could hear a car door slam in the pattern as I flew around. And the National Park Service saw this, and they said, hey, could you demonstrate one of those over the national parks so we could do noise testing? They have a mandate from Congress to protect the night skies and natural sounds in our national parks. And they wanted to see a pathway towards quieter flight so that we can all experience our national parks a little bit quieter. And so I started a program with Embry-Riddle. Let's see if I can get this to play. With Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University down in Florida. And this is a little snippet about the aircraft we're building.
I'm one of the people who believe we're heading to an all-electric economy on this planet.
Pat, is electric flight really the future?
It is the future. It's the next big thing in aircraft propulsion. You know, for 115 years, we've sort of had very similar looking airplanes with very similar propulsion systems. And the advent of electrified propulsion is going to allow us to change the way the world works. It's going to allow for UAVs. It's going to allow for flying cars. It's going to make quieter airplanes more efficient airplanes. It's going to be a greener and easier aviation community for transportation.
Far out. So we've got students creating the future of flight.
We do. So this project here, which is a really exciting project moving forward electrified propulsion, is 95% student driven. So we oversee what's going on and make sure that it's safe, but the students are actually the innovators, the people bringing this to life right now.
I did the motor mount.
I designed the battery pack.
I worked on aircraft performance, battery testing, and motor mount redesign.
I did the battery research on the propulsive battery pack.
BMS. I did the electrical equipment.
I did the electric engine testing, and then I'm the project manager.
At Embry-Riddle, students are designing and creating the next giant leap in transportation technology. The work isn't strictly academic. They're building hardware and solving real-world problems. This plane will be quiet, it will be clean, and of course, no need for gas.
Working on this project, I really learned many things that have never been taught inside the classroom. So for me, innovation is really put new ideas into real things.
I think the ultimate root of innovation for any entrepreneur is massive dissatisfaction with way things are. And it's powered by emotion. It's powered by what I call a massively transformative purpose that drives you to believe that we can change this, that we can create electric autonomous cars, electric autonomous airplanes, that these things are not an if, they're a when.
90 years after my grandfather, Charles Lindbergh, helped jumpstart the golden era of aviation, our team of students are creating a new era in flight. An electric pathway to a clean, quiet, and very exciting future for transportation. Come fly with us. So, that aircraft is just now getting the final touches on the battery packs, and we hope to start flying this fall with taxi tests and then crow hops, and then if all works out, next spring we'll start flying over national parks and doing noise testing and really testing the torque curves of the electric motors and how we can optimize those. It's really a new field in aeronautics, and there's a lot to be learned. And if you need a tax write-off, we can do that with a nonprofit donation. Sorry, shameless self-promotional pitch. along the way, we realized we had all the ingredients for short distance air transportation or a flying car. So we thought, should we do this? This is risky, it's hard, yes, of course we should do this. Flying cars. We've been promised flying cars for 50 years, and we don't have them yet. And traffic is horrible. We absolutely want to do that. The problem, if you think the traffic is bad here in Kansas City, try going over, this is a heat map of population density, try going over to Asia, China, and India, and check out their traffic. They need to start using the third dimension and flying above if you want to get anywhere. So there's the problem. We do have helicopters, and they're incredibly capable. They do this function now. And helicopters are able to drop huge amounts of gear and supplies into incredibly remote places and do research. Yeah, research. That's good work if you can get it. And what we found, our little research team, is that then you climb to the top of a mountain amidst a sea of mountains, and we discovered it. The wind blows like hell up there. And we did snow density testing. Density testing. Did I mention the density of the researchers? Oh, no. But at the end of the day, there is no better aircraft to get you home, to get you to the hospital, to get you home to your family at the end of the day, than a helicopter. The problem is, you can barely hear me, because they're extremely noisy, and no one wants them flying in their backyard all the time. And they're expensive. Again, an example of incredibly noisy flight. And then I've got an example of quiet flight. Check this out. Quiet flight is obviously way better. We need to aspire to that. Just let me know where to go with my GoPro before you try it, and I'll capture that. But seriously, I want to fly above the traffic jam. It's just such a waste of money and time to sit in traffic. So at Oshkosh AirVenture last year, 2017, the three of us, the smartest guys in aviation, hopefully, started a company called Vertigo Arrow. And we started building our personal air taxi, which is, you'll see the design, but there's our logo. Here's a little video that shows what we believe the future will look like.
Air travel, it brings us all closer together. Yet so much of our lives are spent traveling short distances, stuck in traffic jams. But what if you could fly above it all? Radical change is on the horizon, and Vertigo Arrow is flying it directly to you. For a decade now, our team has been at the forefront of electric propulsion, quiet flight, and new vertical takeoff and landing technology. We've been leading the transformation, designing, testing, flying, and certifying the new technologies necessary for the next revolution of flight. Batteries, hybrid propulsion, electric motors, new control systems, they all come together in a new type of aircraft. Vertigo Arrow's personal air taxi moves you quietly, safely, and efficiently to get you where you need to go when you need to get there. creating a new way to move around the planet with short-range, on-demand air transportation. Your personal air taxi is coming. Climb aboard, sit back, you're about to arrive.
Does anybody want one? Yeah, me too. Me too. So that was last summer. This summer, our team, which has an incredible, 10, 8, and 8 years of experience in electric propulsion, the NASA Green Flight Challenge with a hybrid electric aircraft, certifying an aircraft in Germany, et cetera, right through 2017 when we announced this personal air taxi. This summer, we saw 100 plus competitors that we know about who are creating eVTOL, or electric vertical takeoff and landing, urban air mobility vehicles, or flying cars. 100 competitors we had. Some of them well-funded by Larry Page, by Boeing, by Airbus. Uber has put out a spec that says you got to have all electric, and they're creating a little ecosystem that will help build this industry. So the world has taken notice, and there's a tremendous amount of energy moving into it now. And we realized the air had kind of been sucked out of the room, and we thought, this is risky. And we need 100 or 200 million, maybe $300 million to build the supply chain, build the aircraft, build the supply chain, et cetera, subsequent rounds of funding. And that's a huge risk. And it's going to be 5 or 6 years until we start returning any cash on that investment. And that's a lot of competition. And we realized, our strength is in the hybrid electric propulsion systems. So this summer, we made a very difficult decision emotionally to sort of let go of our vehicle design and really pivot and focus on the guts and the nerves and the muscles of this system. Integrated distributed electric propulsion system that we can now be agnostic in the marketplace and turn those 100 competitors into 100 potential customers. In a span of a year to go, we need to shift, and this is where the real opportunity is, and the less risk, and we need a lot less capital to build this business. It's been a roller coaster, and now all of a sudden we're being approached by all these companies who want to play in this industry, many of whom have not announced that they're in that group. So we actually think there's closer to 200 competitors in this industry that haven't announced yet. It is a disruptive field of transportation. So you can imagine it's a multi-billion-dollar industry once it gets going. At any rate, we're really happy we made that switch. And so you can see in the bottom here, sort of I think I have it here, a schematic of our hybrid electric propulsion system. We believe, in fact, we know that batteries are not ready for prime time yet. They just don't have the energy density that gasoline has, right? And in the early days, 10 years ago, when I started going, I want to see if we can build this industry, electric airplanes. And I was told, I'm not an engineer, but I was told by knowledgeable people that the energy density of batteries was increasing at about 10% per year. I could do sort of 8th grade math anyway and see that, 2018, we'll have parity with gasoline, and all of our airplanes will be, all small, generally aviation airplanes, will be electric. Well, I think it's 2018, and we're not there yet. And in fact, one of our advisors, Don Hillebrand, runs the Energy Systems Lab at Argonne National Labs, and he's telling us really that the batteries that we need for aviation that can be certified and are safe and have high energy charge and discharge rates, they're really growing at about 3% per year. So this is a real issue if you're trying to build a company, if you're in one of those 100 companies, trying to build to a spec of batteries that's not available yet. And how do you know as you're building your supply chain and spending all that money to hit that just perfectly so that you can build an aircraft with all batteries that is energy constrained? And if you know about aircraft, they always get heavier as you design them, so you lose useful load and they become potentially unusable. So anyway, that's our business proposition. I didn't intend to get quite so deep into this, but knowing that you guys were a little bit more interested in the mechanics of aerospace and interested in business, that's our proposition. It's been a difficult move as a business to let go of our baby, which we think is still a good design, and we could spin it off if any of you guys want to be the 121st competitor in this industry, but we need to stay agnostic and supply these systems both to you and all of our competitors. So I imagine flying from New York to Paris in 2027 in an electric aircraft. I did it on the 75th anniversary in 2022. And I'd like to see that again. I'm not sure if we can do it, and I want to bring a payload. You know, where do we want to see the future of transportation? And I'm going to need help. So if you're interested in a 100th anniversary, sort of a rolling party from San Diego to St. Louis to New York and Paris in about eight and a half years, where do we want to see aviation? We can sort of we can build that and take that message to the world. I believe it's going to be hybrid electric to be a practical aircraft. Of course, Bertrand Piccard, André Borschberg, and Solar Impulse flew around the world on an all-battery aircraft, but it was really impractical, incredibly expensive. And I'd like to do that flight in a practical aircraft. I think it's going to have to be hybrid, but we have 8 years, so we'll see. If you want to help and be one of those people like Donald Hall, who helped design the aircraft, or his backers in St. Louis who helped, we're just now starting to formulate this. Do we come back to Kansas City? I'd love to. I love this Linda Hall library, which I didn't know about before, but I already want to come back after seeing Archimedes' crew in that ancient book downstairs. Really, I want to make sure that in the future, this little guy has the opportunity and the freedom to fly around that we have today. And maybe he'll get a chance to fly into space and see, as our astronauts describe, you know, this fragile blue ball, planet Earth, which is really the only sustainable spaceship that we have. And we need to make sure that that thrives and survives into the future, so that we, until we can find another habitable planet, which might take 1,000 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my escape. I do it through art, I do it through adventure, and I do it through aerospace. I want to go. I want to see our planet from space. And I want to dig deep and find myself and express myself through art. And I want to have adventure. And that's what keeps my spirit alive. A friend of mine just put this little clip together for me. I'll leave on a real high note. And then we can have questions if you have questions. This little video. Escaping from gravity keeps my spirit alive. The most important part, the propulsion noises. And if you'll notice, I made this little design in the outline of an embryo. to symbolize our infancy in terms of human potential. We think we're smart with our flying cars and PowerPoint projections and cell phones, but really we're just infants in the universe. Thank you.
All right, we have time for a few questions. We're videotaping tonight and live streaming, so we want to get the audio of your question on camera. So raise your hand. I'll come by with the microphone. And I just want to add, before we go to the Q&A, that the book that Erik referenced, How to Make a Spaceship, is indeed available at the library. I have a copy here, so you have to come back and check it out. We'll go to the back of the room.
I know you're going to ask this question. Yes, that was me skiing last year on my titanium and plastic knees. An incredible gift to be able to do that again.
Yes, when you made that shift a year ago, you were going to be like a supplier of eVTOL aircraft as opposed to doing the company specifically yourself. Is that what you were talking about?
We were going to be a manufacturer. We were going to manufacture the aircraft that you saw, the design, and sell that to fleet operators, Uber, whoever, to operate in an urban air mobility on-demand service like Uber or Lyft. And now we're building the propulsion systems like GE or Rolls or Siemens, Pratt & Whitney sell to the aircraft manufacturers. There's a pain point that's coming soon as people realize that especially aviation-specific batteries are going to be very, very difficult to know when they're ready and available. We believe that the investors in those companies are going to go, oh, we need to design to this specification, start with hybrid, and when those batteries come, with an aircraft that has plenty of power, and power that you can use in noise-sensitive areas to reduce your noise if you have excess power, and just swap right out to electric once those batteries are ready. But how you build a business plan that coincides with technology that's not available now, fundamental research, good luck. Otherwise, we're here to help you.
Erik, towards the back of the room on your left.
Congratulations on your excitement and enthusiasm. It was fairly difficult to park here tonight. Have you given any thought to how all these planes flying around in the sky would be controlled? Air traffic issue.
Hey, at least it was free parking, right? It was.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering, is the roof flat up here? I have, it's not in my sort of urban planning purview to figure out exactly where the parking will be, although what we envision or what we've talked about in the industry is really 20 to 40 vertiports, like heliports, around a city like parking garages, where you go directly point to point, and this simplifies the routing issues, and then you take a Lyft or an Uber the final mile, or two, as it were. So that's, I hope, answering part of your question. There's obviously airspace ramifications and so forth. This was one of the issues that helped us really decide that we didn't want to be in an aircraft manufacturing business. We wanted to supply propulsion systems, is that there are so many barriers to entry in this business. And we all know the old adage, if you want to make a small fortune in aviation, you need to start with a large fortune. Plenty of examples. We've all been in the industry for a long time, and between FAA certification and the unknown costs there, and airspace, in order to scale this industry to see what that disruptive future might look like, Jetson style, there's a lot of hurdles that need to be overcome. And we're seeing breathless reports of the latest company that's announcing, saying they're going to be flying in 2019 and certified by 2022 or 23. We'll see.
Eric, up here on the front on your right, sir. I'll come around your shoulder here.
Earlier, you spoke of Tesla and their space exploration. And of course, Tesla has invested an extraordinary amount of money into battery development as well.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about how those two confluences might be affecting your work.
Sure. Well, Elon, who started both Tesla and SpaceX, which I conjoined, or he conjoined when he sent his old Tesla Roadster out into space. And the question really is batteries. So he has the Gigafactory. He's building, a giant battery bank in Australia to help temper the grid so they don't get as many blackouts. One of the problems that we're seeing right now with the battery development is that it's driven by the automotive manufacturers. There's been miniaturization, so we have drones and tons of those, and then, automobiles and laptops. But automobiles, very specifically, they don't care if their batteries are heavy, right? They just throw on another pack because they're operating on the ground. What they really care about, and this is where we may see I said aviation-specific batteries are increasing energy density about 3% per year, approximately. We may slow down because all of the research and development now by auto manufacturers, the big battery manufacturers, it seems to be in reducing the cost. And that doesn't help us other than a little cheaper batteries. What we need are lighter batteries that can discharge a huge amount of energy with the vertical takeoff. That's the main energy use. Then if you have a wing that you can transition to, you generate lift, and that's a very low energy discharge rate to fly to your destination. Then you use a high discharge rate again, which is hard on batteries. And so we need that energy and the ability for those batteries to have massive charge and discharge cycles. So with all of that research moving into lower cost batteries, we're not doing it for aviation. Maybe what we need is government assistance or some sort of industry initiative to do real work on how to decrease the weight of batteries because aircraft are mass constrained.
So even if you solve all the other problems like energy density and parking and all that, who's going to fly these? Who in the industry is working on the AI to fly these systems?
Fantastic questions. Who is going to fly these things? Well, so we started with a two-seat design, because it's small, it's closer to doable right away, and you can have a piloted two-seat design. Right? So just like today we have pilots flying small aircraft. The real economies of scale don't start kicking in until you have autonomous aircraft. And we can see that coming because vehicles are becoming autonomous now. And aircraft, in theory, aircraft have a lot less hazards in the air, if you will. There's less people darting across the road in front of you. So there's less hazards. It's more feasible in a lot of ways. The problem with autonomy and aircraft is, hackers, quite frankly, if it hasn't been hacked, it will be hacked. And so the issue I think that we're seeing emerge right now is that, I think it will be safer to have autonomous vehicles in many respects. But if we can't solve the hacking issue, I think we will, and there's different ideas and approaches and so forth, then we can realize economies of scale that we haven't seen before in short-distance air travel. In the meantime, personally, I kind of think that the larger vehicles 5 to 7 seat vehicles with a pilot on board, which changes your operating economics, that might go first. And that's sort of flipped from what we thought earlier, because autonomy is really coming along. But until it's real, like the batteries, until they're manufacturable and they're safe, and you start to achieve economies of scale, the cost comes down, et cetera, it might not apply to us.
How about an XPRIZE for batteries?
We've looked at it for years, actually, with XPRIZE. XPRIZE, we became legitimate after we gave the big prize that we didn't raise the full amount of the money for. And we now have over $100 million in active prize competitions, and another $100 million or so in the pipeline of trying to solve the world's grand challenges coming at us using prize philanthropy. Using incentive prizes is really complex and costly as an organization. And what we realized was that the battery issue is really being solved by both industry and government. And so an incentive prize might rapidly be eclipsed. The other part, sorry to blather on so long, the other interesting piece is that batteries, I'm losing my train of thought. I'll get back to it, or just go ahead.
Thank you for this. It's all very exciting. I can't wait for the future. None of us can, but I do have a question about the using national parks as a noise testing laboratory. Why national parks?
Why national parks? So, very specifically, the Grand Canyon has grandfathered air tour vehicles and an ongoing effort to make those vehicles quieter. And I've taken several flights in the Grand Canyon, and it's epic. It's extraordinary. And if you're disabled, that might be the only way you can experience the parks. As I said, Congress mandated that we protect the night skies and natural sounds at our national parks. So they have a real appetite to show a pathway towards quieter air tour vehicles. And electric makes a certain amount of sense, especially in the beginning. If it's all electric, they'll be clean, they'll be quiet, and they don't necessarily go fast or far, but that's fine for a national park. You want big windows so you can really see and absorb that. There's the bottom line, and we may not be testing like over the coolest spots in the park because we'd be creating noise and a fuss, but we want to build that capability so that all of us can experience the parks, and as we get older, or before we have our knees replaced, or have bionics that work, that we can experience those treasures in a quiet way.
Eric, we have a question at the back of the room.
So to build on the question about where you're going to park, isn't it a little bit inefficient to take one of the air taxis and then get an Uber? Wouldn't it be more efficient if you could just park it in a normal parking space?
Yes. Yeah, good question. So one of the big issues with air taxis, flying cars, flying around at any kind of scale, and it's an issue with helicopters, is that people don't necessarily want these things flying in their neighborhood or near maybe their cars or anywhere near them. And if you think about drones, have you ever been around a drone as it's flying? It sounds like angry bees. It sounds like it's going to cut you. So one of the big, I think the quietest flying cars will be the ones that are the most commercially successful, even if they're not the most efficient, because of the human factor. In order to scale, we need humans to be happy with that experience. And so I don't think we're going to be able to park in any, all of a sudden, whoa, there's a flying car landing next to you in the parking lot. I think they're going to have to be segregated to those vertiports and sort of be in and out and doing peak traffic times, helping people move. So that's sort of my best answer. Less efficient, but I think the human factor sort of trumps everything. Sorry.
We got a follow-up question.
I just think that there has to be like a way, because people will never use flying cars personally if they're scared of them. So I just think that there has to be a way to get over that and be able to use them like interchangeably with cars. So I just feel like if you can't do that, flying cars, like, how are you going to make that transition if there's no way to make the transition?
Right. Awesome question. So, and I think if you really look at the market, there are ideas of car pods or pods that the propulsion unit snaps onto, locks onto, and then it flies and drops, and the pod flies away or drives away. So your question about the transition is, I mean, it's brilliant because nobody really knows how that transition is going to happen. In the long run, I think, we'll probably all be very quietly just going vip through, and we're all home or close to home. The transition to it is going to be very interesting because I don't think we're going to see flying cars landing in this parking lot soon. Maybe if there's a helipad on the vertiport on the roof or nearby, and then there's a shuttle, we'll catch the shuttle bus and it'll drop us off, and then we'll go back. So I think, it'll come in stages is probably the best answer, but nobody really knows. We'll see. Thank you.
Erik, a question on your right towards the back of the room, and due to the time, let's make this the last question. I know there are a few hands up, but you're going to stick around for a few minutes and
sure.
Can answer questions.
Hello. I was wondering, earlier in your lecture, you referred to electric energy as clean. However, it uses coal, and I was wondering if there's any development in that arena as far as making it more clean, because it's a limited resource with coal.
Yeah, coal is a tough one in terms of providing electrical energy, or hydropower even. We dam the rivers and the salmon don't flow, and we need salmon. The orcas need salmon. The Earth is bathed in something like 8,000 times the energy that we need by the sun. So there's plenty of energy. We need to get better at harvesting that energy. And I think, the age of coal is now waning. So we're seeing less and less of it, mostly. Although some countries are still developing coal plants pretty rapidly. I think that's going to phase out. One, because the cost of solar panels is going down, the manufacturing cost, the installation cost, all of that has come down dramatically, and so we're starting to see that. And so you're absolutely right. How we generate that electricity is incredibly important. And in terms of our company's pivot, it's not as energy efficient. It's not as green, if you will, to have a piston or a turbine generator that then powers the batteries and the electric motors. What it is a transitional step that gets us closer and closer to it. And I think, we've seen aircraft with solar panels on the wings to collect solar energy. It's super inefficient, not necessarily worth the weight of the solar panels and the equipment to generate that electricity, because you can generate very little while you're in flight. However, making those transitions is the important thing, and so I think it's coming. I mean, you could go deep down that rabbit hole and say, well, what about batteries? Batteries are hard on the Earth and so forth. So there's all kinds of questions we need to answer and barriers we need to get past. We just have to keep chipping away at each little problem that we can solve and build on that.
Erik, thank you for a wonderful lecture. Thank you for coming to Kansas City. Matt Steinmetz, Chief Engineer from Scaled Composites, will be here November 8th. It was referenced earlier, the Spaceship One, and many other projects. So thank you for attending tonight's program, and have a safe trip home.
Thank you.